All right, welcome in. Happy Tuesday. It's a good time right now to turn the page. I'm sure people are tired of talking about the 49ers lost to the Browns. We do have some extra time this week because the 49ers don't move on to Minnesota until Monday Night Football, but I think it's a great time to give you the initial scouting report of the Minnesota Vikings. In the context of their matchup against the 49ers, I do this every single week. It sets the table for the practices ahead, it sets the table for the game ahead. And I think that this week is a very interesting matchup, as it always is in the NFL. But this one, obviously, Brock Purdy and Kirk Cousins on the same field. We all know the story, right? The history of Kyle Shanahan and Kirk Cousins, and the fact that Cousins seems to pop up in 49ers QB related conversations all the time. Well, I think Brock Purdy's been good enough here to start this season to really quiet the Kirk Cousins discussions. He's going to be a free agent, or set to be a free agent, by the way, after this season. Kirk Cousins is. But it's still going to be an interesting barometer. Anytime that we get to see Kirk on the other side, well, we're reminded of Shanahan's past. We're reminded of what people thought the ideal Shanahan quarterback was. He obviously did like Kirk Cousins, enjoyed his time with him, but I think there's a chance that Brock Purdy gives Kyle Shanahan something a little extra that Kirk Cousins currently isn't giving the Minnesota Vikings. And he's near the top of the league in passing yardage. Kirk is behind only Tua Tagovailoa, but he hasn't been nearly as good as that number might lead you to believe. And that's the first thing I'm going to talk about in this initial scouting report. Do not be fooled by Kirk Cousins' numbers. He is number 2 league-wide in passing yardage, as I just said. That being said, take a look at this right here. We're going to take a look at quarterback efficiency in the National Football League. Summer Sports is a great website, by the way, to sort this out. Expected points added per play. So Kirk, number 2 in passing yardage. Here we could sort by passing yardage first, behind only Tua, 1,679 yards for the 2-4 Vikings. But if you actually, looking at raw stats is just not smart. That's not a good way to gauge whether somebody's being effective or not. And a much more effective way to do that is to look at things on a per play basis. Well, on a per play basis, Kirk Cousins is nowhere near the top. Brock Purdy has been the most efficient quarterback in football, even after his first bad game against the Cleveland Browns. And you have to go all the way down to number 16 to find Kirk Cousins, just ahead of Jimmy Garoppolo, who's had an injury-riddled year with the Raiders. Raiders aren't running the football well. They're dead last in rushing efficiency. I mean, Garoppolo's still just above average efficiency, 0.02, but I think everybody would agree he's having a down season. Kirk Cousins, even with all those passing yards, is down there at Jimmy Garoppolo's EPA number. Meanwhile, Purdy has been lighting the world on fire, 0.35 EPA per play. So don't be fooled by Cousins' numbers, because to me, they're so emblematic of what Cousins usually gives us. He's had a higher EPA before. He's been more efficient before. But the issue with him goes back, and I think it's best symbolized by how the playoffs last season ended for the Minnesota Vikings. They go back to him not being able to do enough, not being able to make a big enough splash at crunch time, and the efficiency numbers end up reflecting that. There's a difference between garbage yardage and efficient yardage, and I don't think that the Minnesota Vikings are getting enough of the latter so far this season. The Vikings are 2-4, and Kirk Cousins is 7-11 in his Vikings career ever since signing with them in 2018 in prime time. The reason I put up the prime time number is twofold. One, the 49ers are playing the Vikings in prime time, and two, there really is more scrutiny on these primetime national TV games. I think you do have to have a little bit more of an it factor. You do have to dig a little bit deeper. You do have to be ready for the spotlight. And that's something that it just seems that Kirk Cousins hasn't consistently been ready for. I will say that the Vikings, despite the record, the 2-4 record, the data says they've been a little bit unlucky this season. The data actually suggests, some of the data suggests they should be 5-1 or 6-0 because they haven't played great opponents. And in the games that they have played, somebody better, the opponent hasn't been as good. That's based on PFF data. That's based on something like this right here that came out today that suggests that the Vikings, who you see at the very bottom, have lost the most win probability negative 133.5% due to bad luck. They fumbled the ball 9 times. They've had dropped interception issues. All kinds of stuff suggests the Vikings might progress back to the mean. But at the end of the day, this is a 2-4 football team that I think, the data also suggests is mediocre. And you can be both mediocre and unlucky. And I think that is very fitting with Kirk Cousins at quarterback. I think that he's been mediocre this year in terms of efficiency. I don't care how many passing yards he has, because as you can see, number 2 in the league in passing yards has not correlated with winning for the Vikings. They're 2-4, and you find them right here in the middle, right at the intersection of the X and the Y axis, as a first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth tier football team. The 49ers, meanwhile, remain the only tier 1 team in the NFL. So that's the book on Minnesota. Yes, they've been unlucky. The data suggests that. But yes, they've also been mediocre. And that goes hand in hand with what we've seen from Kirk Cousins, I think, over most of his tenure with Minnesota. Sometimes he's been better with the efficiency numbers. This year he hasn't. This year he's racked up a lot of garbage yardage. And, you look at some different metrics for Minnesota. They're number 19 in red zone offense. They're number 24 on third down. They're not picking up the yardage that actually matters. And Cousins' favorite target's not going to play against the 49ers. That's Justin Jefferson. So the Vikings don't do anything particularly well. They don't do anything particularly poorly. But again, mediocrity is something that I think is very, very apparent with this football team. And that's what the 49ers are going to have to take on Monday night. That being said, the 49ers obviously have their health issues. And we'll see if Christian McCaffrey plays. We'll see if Deebo Samuel plays. We'll see if Trent Williams is ready to play. And there are some points of danger, even with no Justin Jefferson from Minnesota, that can threaten the 49ers. One such point of danger is the blitz rate that the Vikings run. 33.2%. That blitz rate leads the NFL. Brian Flores, the former Miami coach, is the Vikings defensive coordinator. He loves to get aggressive with the blitzes. I know that the 49ers have already taken on and vanquished one extremely high blitz rate team. That was the New York Giants, who actually set an NFL record going as far back as it's been tracked, with an 85% blitz rate against the 49ers in week 3. It took about a quarter for the 49ers to get adapted in that game. Then they went to a lot of screen passes. The screen passes diffused the blitzes, and then Brock Purdy delivered the finishing strike with a deep shot to Deebo Samuel. So Purdy has already proven to be ready for teams that blitz a lot. He's going to have to do it again in all likelihood in this game against Minnesota, because the 49ers are 6.5-point favorites. Whenever you're the favorite and the underdog is known for blitzing, well, you can count on the underdog to continue blitzing. The Vikings are going to want to create as much chaos as possible to tilt this game into their favor. Purdy's handled the blitz rate, a high blitz rate, fine once this season already. He's faced blitzes against other teams too throughout his career. Last season, you can remember the Dolphins woke him up right out of bed with a high blitz rate, and Purdy has done well in those games, 30 plus for the 49ers in all of the games with an extremely high blitz rate. Last week, yes, the Browns were aggressive, but I mean, this is a different level of defense than what the 49ers are going to see from the Vikings. The Browns were able to get onto Brock Purdy with their 4 up front. They did blitz at different times, but they won that game in large part because of what Myles Garrett was able to do against an injured Trent Williams, because of the Zadarius Smith pressure, because of Dalvin Tomlinson living in the backfield from the interior. It's a different story. The Vikings are not the Browns defensively. It will actually ease up in terms of the personnel that the 49ers are facing. But the blitz rate is the blitz rate, and the 49ers are going to have to be ready for it. Now, the good news is they have an extra day to prepare for it, because this game is not until Monday night. Against the Giants, I think Wink Martindale, who's their defensive coordinator, he said, well, we're playing these guys on Thursday night. The 49ers won't have all too much time to prepare. Let's throw the kitchen sink at them on a short week. And that probably discombobulated the 49ers for the first couple of drives. The 49ers seem to be using the start of that game to set stuff up for later. Remember against the Giants, the first 2 plays, they lined up in the pistol. And I was tweeting about it at the time. I think I talked about it at the time. I'm like, why are they lining up in the pistol? They just ran twice out of the pistol. It was nothing special. Well, guess what? Against Dallas a couple weeks later, the 49ers ran the double pitch flea flicker that was a touchdown from Brock Purdy to George Kittle out of the pistol. So the 49ers are still playing a long game offensively, as they should, because they're so damn good this year. They're still Super Bowl favorites. They, of course, are a top-tier football team, as you could see them out here. And I think that a lot of the early struggles against the Giants happened because the 49ers were playing a long game and they were facing an unprecedented blitz rate. They might have been a little caught off surprise with a little less time to prepare that week since it was a Thursday night game. But ultimately, they figured it out. And now they're going to have to figure out this Vikings high blitz rate from Brian Flores, but they're going to have a longer week to do it. And I think that's really, really key. On the other side of the football, the Vikings do not have a strong run game. They have Cam Akers. They traded for him, the former Ram. They also have Alexander Mattison. No more Dalvin Cook over in Minnesota. But the run game to support Kirk Cousins, who, again, there's a lot of garbage yardage coming from Cousins this year, but the run game is not providing a sturdy backbone. And it's so important to have a run game in the NFL. The 49ers only seem to lose when the other team is able to run the ball well against them because that's what can diffuse their pass rush. That's what puts the pass rush back on its heels. Last week, it was the number 17 run game in football, the Cleveland Browns, who racked up those 160 yards against the 49ers. San Francisco was not happy with its performance against the run. They thought they needed to set better edges. They thought they needed to be more disciplined on the interior. They definitely needed to tackle better. Listen to this. The 49ers, their 10 missed tackles, that was more than the missed tackles of their previous 3 games combined. So the Cleveland outing was not good for the defense in terms of stopping the run. And now they face a run offense that is not good in Minnesota. Keep it that way if you're the 49ers. It's baby steps to rebuild this run defense, which is uncharacteristically bad this year. The 49ers are number 25 in run defense EPA, which matches Minnesota's rank in run offense. 49ers also ranked number 25 in run defense. So the 49ers need to play that battle to their favor. Because if you don't, then Kirk Cousins is going to have time. And if Kirk Cousins has time, well, then the garbage yardage, the low third down percentage, the low red zone percentage, that kind of stuff can go up against you. And if that happens, the 49ers will be on upset alert in this football game. So it will be key for them to continue to keep Minnesota's run game down at number 25 and to reverse their own trend of struggles in run defense. Now, Minnesota has a solid offensive line. I look at Minnesota up front, and obviously I see Christian Darrisaw, their left tackle. That's going to be a hell of a matchup with Nick Bosa whenever Bosa lines up on the left side. They rank number 5 in pass block win rate. That is a metric from ESPN that measures the entire line cumulatively. So that alone makes Minnesota a team that you have to treat seriously. It makes them potentially dangerous, right? Because if you got 5 guys who can block decently well, I would say that Ed Ingram, the right guard, is the weak link of that offensive line for Minnesota. So maybe a big Javon Hargrave game, maybe a big Eric Armstead game focusing on that. Even if Bosa plays it to a draw against a guy like Darrisaw, okay, fine. You look to the interior if you're the 49ers. But in general, since Minnesota is strong up front, and since Kirk Cousins can be accurate, even if he's not a big-time quarterback who's winning all these huge games, all that an accurate quarterback needs is good pass protection in front of him. And if he gets a decent run game, because the 49ers have struggled on run defense, all of a sudden, Cousins can do some damage against you, even without Justin Jefferson. TJ Hawkinson, the tight end out of Iowa, is his favorite receiving target, 36 catches this year. But the Vikings haven't been all that explosive offensively, so there does seem to be a really good chance that the 49ers defense keeps Minnesota in front of them and makes them look like the mediocre team that they have been so far this season. Now, somebody who hasn't been mediocre is Danielle Hunter. Minnesota edge rusher. I know there have been some trade rumors surrounding Danielle Hunter. He's got 8 sacks already this season. His name should be in the Defensive Player of the Year conversation just because of that alone. I know it's not all about sacks. It might not even primarily be about sacks, but you could put him into the conversation because he has those 8 sacks. The problem for the Vikings is that their rest of their defensive line doesn't scare anybody, especially with Marcus Davenport heading to injured reserve with a high ankle sprain. So they're getting pressure for Danielle Hunter. They're not getting enough pressure from anybody else. That's why this defense remains mired in mediocrity, especially with Marcus Davenport out. Again, double team Hunter, Chip Hunter, do what you need to. Direct more defensive attention to that side. Make sure Brock Purdy's mindful of him, and you should be able to seal the pocket for the other players. The 49ers offensive line is coming off a rough performance against Cleveland, but this is certainly a chance to bounce back. That leads me back to the Vikings blitz rate. 33.2% leads the National Football League. And you could see why Brian Flores is doing it and why he's keeping his foot on the gas, because he's not getting enough pressure from the front four outside of Danielle Hunter. So he's making sure to bring his linebackers. And they got a couple good linebackers. Jordan Hicks is now on this football team, the former Arizona Cardinal. Jordan Hicks can rush the passer. So can the other linebacker, Ivan Pace. Ivan Pace already has 8 pressures this season. Between the two linebackers, we see Minnesota have 113 pass rushes, combined pass rushes from the second level so far this season. That's a lot through just 6 games of the year. They're also strong up the middle. I like the nickelback, Josh Metellus. I like Harrison Smith, the safety. And then a former Cal Bear, Cameron Bynum, cornerback. He has moved from corner to safety. College corner, NFL safety. So I like Minnesota up the middle defensively. I do not like them out on the cornerback positions. They have Byron Murphy Jr., who I think is past his prime. And then they have a taller, younger cornerback called Caleb Evans. And Caleb Evans is dealing with some oblique soreness right now. I do think that Minnesota is weaker on the perimeter than they are inside. So maybe more of a game for Brandon Ayuk. Jawan Jennings, who's been running some good routes on the outside. We'll see if Deebo Samuel's available. We'll see where McCaffrey is, where Kittle is. Or even if the 49ers play those guys, but use them as decoys against the stronger interior of the Vikings pass coverage, but then hit the exterior. It'll all come down to pass protection. You have to neutralize Danielle Hunter if you're going to be throwing to the outside, if you're Brock Purdy. But I do think that's where Minnesota's defense might be soft. This is correct. Danielle Hunter is having a massive season. Big picture, I think this game is sneakily important for the 49ers. Why? Because they're 5-1. The bye week is coming up after the next 2 games. The second of this 2-game stretch is back home against the Cincinnati team that seems to be playing a lot better now. And that game at home against Cincinnati will come on short rest because they play Minnesota on Monday night. So short week, fly back Monday night. You don't get back until the early hours of Tuesday morning to the Bay Area, and you've got to get going right away if you're the 49ers. There is no little day off if you're the 49ers. You got to get going with practice. I know they'll, if they do Tuesday, I mean, normally the player's day off is Tuesday, but it can't be because of the short week, right? So you have to turn around and fly. You're traveling in the wee hours of your off day. Treatment, you got to come in for treatment. It's not a real off day, right? And then they're going to go Wednesday, Thursday, Friday practice before the game against the Bengals on Sunday. That leads us up to the bye week. The 49ers definitely don't want to enter the bye week on a losing note. That would leave a very sour taste in their mouths. So they're going to have to beat a resurgent Bengals team on a short week following a flight back home from Minnesota. The only good news for the 49ers is that game's at home. But they can't look ahead to that game because they have a primetime game against the Minnesota Vikings first. And I think that the entire league is a target on the 49ers' backs. I think the 49ers are recognized right now as the top team in the NFL. There's a big target on their backs. They also might look a little bit more vulnerable since they lost to the Cleveland Browns. So this next 2-game stretch, just as far as keeping morale at as high as possible entering the bye week, as far as rolling momentum into the second half of the season, I think this is a sneaky, important 2-week stretch. The 49ers are currently 7.5-point favorites against the Minnesota Vikings, or 6.5-point favorites. That might grow to 7.5, maybe even 8.5. I know last week's spread grew a lot, depending on the injury report this week. Right? We're still waiting on official news for McCaffrey, for Samuel, for Trent Williams, and probably we'll get our next updates on Thursday when the 49ers open up this practice week. It's going to be Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. So that's the 49ers Vikings initial scouting report. Happy to open it up to a Q&A. Hey, we're getting near 49,000 followers, subscribers, followers, same thing. This is a 49ers related discussion, right? A 49ers related channel. So go ahead and hit that subscribe button right now. If you haven't, you could be 49K. You could be at that lucky number. So don't forget to do it. Hit the notification bell as well. I don't even know what trap game means. Can somebody define it for me? Because I'm not sure anybody knows what it means. I don't think the 49ers overlooked the Browns at all. I think Cleveland has a damn good defense. That defense showed up. It's been historically good. How could a game against a historically good defense, like the third best defense in terms of yards allowed through 5 games since 1970, how can a game against that caliber of a defense be a trap game? I don't get it. The Browns also were coming off of a bye week, so they had a little extra energy. The teams had a little shoving match before the game, so there was a little bit of bad blood. The 49ers just didn't make the plays they needed to make. They dropped some passes. They saw Brock Purdy overshoot a couple passes. He threw behind Brandon Ayuk for an interception, and then they missed 2 kicks. So people look too much into this trap game stuff, and they're trying to create narratives. Bottom line is the 49ers just didn't execute well enough. It happens. People are human. It's an imperfect sport, and it's played in extremely difficult circumstances. A bunch of the best, biggest athletes in the world flying around at each other, trying to take each other's heads off. So sometimes you're not going to execute perfectly. And the 49ers didn't. There were more errors than usual in this game against the Browns. I don't think the 49ers lost focus. I think that the Browns were fresher coming off of a bye week. The 49ers traveled across country against a really good team, and they lost. They made more mistakes in this game. I think they were focused, but everybody in the NFL is paid to be good, and the Browns are exceptionally good on the defensive side of the ball. They just made more plays than the 49ers. They look better. I think if this game is replayed, if both teams have equal rest, I think the 49ers would win. I think if that game that we saw the other day were played 10 times, the 49ers would win more than 5 of them. Because I don't think they would miss some of the opportunities that they missed. I think the officials might call a couple things a little bit differently too. Just how life works in the NFL, though. These teams all have talent. The other side is paid too, and the Browns beat the 49ers. Bosa said it right. The 49ers did not deserve to win that game. Trent Williams said the same thing. If the 49ers had won, they wouldn't have deserved it. The Browns were more efficient than them. 4.8 yards per play, 3.9 for the 49ers. It's, you don't win every single game in the NFL. Doesn't matter how good you are. You do not win every single game in the NFL. The closest that we've seen recently was the Patriots, right, in 2007, but that was 18-1. You just got to make sure that one or those 2 losses don't come in the Super Bowl or in the playoffs. You want them to happen in the regular season. This is a cool factoid. The 49ers have never won in Cleveland. I didn't know that. They barely play in Cleveland. It's very rare. I wish I would have known that, but it's good that Team Cali knows that, so I could let everybody know right now on the show. Why are the 49ers ranked number 25 in run defense? Well, because they're not setting good enough edges. They're not being disciplined enough on the interior. You got to be really, really disciplined on the interior if you're playing a wide 9 pass rushing, right? Because everything is stretched out. The gaps are bigger. They were missing Dre Greenlaw the other day. The goal of the 49ers run defense in the wide 9 is to prevent teams from running outside. They want to funnel that rushing traffic back toward the middle of the field. And when it gets funneled into the middle of the field, the linebackers clean up. They missed 10 tackles the other day without Greenlaw. So they're just fundamentally not playing great defense. I mean, I showed Javon Kinlaw coming too far upfield on the big Jerome Ford run. It's stuff like that the 49ers are just systematically not doing well right now. They struggled in the first half against the Rams running the football. They struggled for much of the game against the Cardinals, who were running the football against them. And obviously they struggled throughout most of the game against the Browns, who did a good job with the power run against them. And the Browns also, I mean, they ran some tricky stuff. They ran some traps that the 49ers fell for. And, I mean, it was a trap game in that the Browns ran the trap offensively and the 49ers run defense was not fully ready for it. Greenlaw's coming along well. I don't think I included this in the update yesterday because I was rushing through and I didn't hear Kyle Shanahan mention that Dre Greenlaw would be back at practice this week coming off the hamstring injury. So that is a big positive for the 49ers. Alberto wants an injury update. Well, Greenlaw's going to be back at practice this week. Christian McCaffrey, we're waiting on the MRI results, but I do think that it's not as serious as people might have initially feared. So he's probably going to be back sooner rather than later, maybe even by Monday, but let's wait until Thursday when we get official word. Day-to-day status for Deebo Samuel and his shoulder, day-to-day status for Trent Williams and his ankle. I mean, every single injury is a pain management thing. I don't think this is new information, right? I mean, like literally, injuries are painful. Can you manage it? As I told you, I ran into Christian McCaffrey in the locker room after the game. He thought that he was going to be okay, but he had to undergo the testing. The testing happened yesterday. We don't have official word as to how the testing went. So right now, we're just talking in speculation, and there's no reason to speculate more than we have to until we have more information. Josh asks, hypothetical question. If the 49ers win the Super Bowl and you finally reveal the number 17 jersey, which is not behind me right now, by the way, because I'm in a different spot. But do you have another mystery item to keep us guessing about until the next Super Bowl victory? I'm not thinking that far ahead. I think the 49ers need to win a Super Bowl under my tenure of covering the team before I think about what I'll do ahead of the second Super Bowl. Randy Gregory already has helped with the run defense. I don't think that yeah, I mean, he really fought. It was impressive to me how he fought off DeJuan Jones, who was 130 pounds heavier than him, for a tackle for loss. I don't think that Randy Gregory was the issue in the 49ers run defense in this game. It was a nice debut for Randy Gregory. He's rigid and powerful, especially since he only checks in at 242. So he's a complete player. He absolutely is going to help the 49ers run defense. I just don't think that he was at fault for this slippage on Sunday. Oh, Adam Schefter tweeted. I didn't see that. I just hopped on live. Yeah, this is good news for the 49ers. I'll have an update on this separate. None of the injuries to 49ers standouts, Christian McCaffrey, Deebo Samuel, and Trent Williams, are considered long-term per sources. Each has a chance to be ready for Monday night's game at Minnesota, though the work week will determine who can play and who can't. It's great news for the 49ers. We're tweeting. Great news for the 49ers. McCaffrey, Samuel, and Williams all in line for relatively quick returns. Exactly what SF needs to maintain its favorite status. Health is the key variable. Much more important than the outcome of any singular regular season game. I think that's an important point. Here, I'll post this tweet, then I'm going to read it in its entirety, because I think that the point is a very salient one as we try to maintain perspective throughout this 49ers season. Great news for the 49ers. McCaffrey, Samuel, and Williams all in line for relatively quick returns. Exactly what the 49ers need to maintain their Super Bowl favorite status. Health is the key variable, much more important than the outcome of any singular regular season game. A lot of people get caught up in the weeds. Like, oh, great. The 49ers missed a kick and they didn't win. 49ers missed a pass to Brandon Ayuk and they didn't win. You're not going to win every single regular season game. You're probably going to go 14-3, 15-2, maybe even 13-4 like they did last year. The goal is to win that race toward the number one seed. And you know what? Detroit right now is locking horns with the 49ers, at least off the field. I'll have to talk about that in a little bit. Deebo Samuel, CJ Gardner-Johnson, who happens to be on IR right now. But Detroit has thrust themselves into that race for the number one seed with the 49ers in Philadelphia. And you want that NFC playoff picture to go through your home stadium. The 49ers want it to come through Levi's. Philly wants it to come through their place, which was such a hostile place for the 49ers last year. And Detroit wants it to go through Ford Field. And there's other teams that are going to throw their hats into the ring. I'm sure it's a long season. So the key right now is to win as many games as possible, especially these NFC games. So you have a potential tiebreaker to get into that position. But to be able to collect wins en masse, you've got to be healthy. So the health is more important than the outcome of any singular game. Well, I think there's no verdict on Jake Moody yet. I think Moody, he's a 9 of 11 kicker that happened to miss his first career game-winning attempt. What if he makes his next 10? What are you going to say then? Trying to judge Jake Moody right now is foolish, period. It's absolutely foolish. It's premature. It's not constructive. He just had his first attempt as a rookie. Is he under a microscope? Yes. Was he under a microscope before this? Also, yes. Nothing has changed. Sit back, let the sample accumulate. That's what a good business does. That's what a good football team does. And we know that the 49ers are a very well run football team. The kicking in Cleveland is really tough. It's a windy stadium. And as you saw in some of those graphics that showed the wind impact on that kick, it's the wind that pushed it to the right. So all that Moody has to do is account for the wind better. One way to do that is to accumulate experience kicking in different NFL stadiums. That's going to take a little bit of time. That's why this is a team sport. You help Jake Moody out a bit. Now, there's the whole theory that the 49ers should have moved the ball up a little bit further, but that would have come with risks too. Cleveland was living in their backfield. The penalties were off the charts for the 49ers, 12 for 105 yards. What happens if you slip up with another penalty? Push that one out to 52 yards. I mean, it was one of those situations where it might have been damned if you do, damned if you don't. You just got to make the 41-yarder. Moody didn't make it. You move on. I'm sure if he got 10 other shots at it, he'd probably make 9 out of 10, maybe even 10 out of 10 after the experience of missing it. So, I mean, people need to look at this a little bit more intelligently. And Anthony's takedown here, kicking in Cleveland is tough, is, I think, the right way to see it. Donlin thinks that Detroit is fool's gold. Well, I'm not so sure. They're top 5 offense and top 5 defense, just like the 49ers. They're the only other team that's top 5 in both through 6 weeks. So I think Detroit's been building it from the ground up. They've put a great system now around Jared Goff to help resurrect his career. The defense has gotten a lot better. They were a bad defense last year paired with a good offense. You got to tip your cap and see where this goes. And if CJ Gardner-Johnson comes back and they do play the 49ers, well, he's setting up some fireworks right now with Deebo Samuel. It's hard not to like what the Lions are doing. A lot of what they're doing is emulated the 49ers. They've showed up and they said, okay, we're going to run the football. We're going to run play action. We're going to play tough defense. We're going to follow the 49ers ball control model. So I think that this is a potentially good rivalry brewing, especially considering the war of words between Samuel and CJ Gardner-Johnson. 3-way tie, 49ers, Eagles, and Lions. Yes, sir. Yeah, I mean, Philadelphia did pick up Julio Jones, but come on, let's be a little bit more specific. They picked up 34-year-old Julio Jones, who hasn't been impressive in a few years. Not really sure how that's going to move the needle for them. An injury-riddled few years for Julio Jones. The Lions definitely do have an easier schedule than most teams. That's a great point. I don't think that you want to trade Elijah Mitchell right now when Christian McCaffrey's probably his status is in question for Monday. Keep that stable of running backs. Don't make your team worse right now if you're the 49ers. Somebody's yawning here at the prospect of Philadelphia picking up Julio Jones. All right. Sounds good. I have one more thing to do. We're 33 subs away from 49,000. So why don't everybody go ahead and get on board there? I'll have another update video here coming soon, though, on the 49ers and their health situation. So I'll talk to everybody soon. Thanks for joining. This has been the initial. This has been the initial scouting report on 49ers Vikings. A little bit of a slip up there. I exited too soon, but thanks for joining, and we'll talk to you in just a few minutes.